Welcome to the Roland Rock Podcast presents WrestleCast. I am your host, Rene Canas, and I'm here with my co-host, Rocky,
Hey, everybody.
and my other co-host, Roland.
Hey, everybody.
And we have our special guest this week with joining us, Jon.
Hello.
And this week we are discussing the greatest wrestlers never to win the heavyweight title. It was kind of difficult to narrow it down to just a couple guys. I pretty much narrowed it down to about 15, and then we each kind of picked our top 5 from there. To kind of simplify it a little bit, we kind of kept it to just WWE, WCW / NWA. So to get started, at number 5, we have a tie at number 5. We'll go with Owen Hart first on the list. So the thing with Owen that, we all know about, tragic ending for Owen. The thing that's a bit heartbreaking in his case in never winning the title was that he was actually scheduled to win the title. There's actually photo shoot evidence of him having the title around his waist, having the King of the Ring crown, all that stuff. It's kind of what led to his very great 1994 and that he had for his career. So I just wanted to go over some of our favorite memories of Owen. So I'll just hand it off to Rocky first. What do you remember about Owen?
Biggest thing I think I remember about Owen is not when he was Owen Hart, but when he was the Blue Blazer. And I really liked him as the Blue Blazer. And it's not really like a specific thing, but just his whole like character as the Blue Blazer. And that what could I call it? That weird like fuzzy thing he would wear. And you remember, you know what I'm talking about? He'd wear it the other.
Yeah.
It was almost like something that I forget his real name at the time, but the original Nature Boy used to wear out on stage.
Buddy Rogers.
Yeah.
Talking about it like a feather boa.
Well, no, it was
Yeah.
part of his outfit. It was actually sewed into his outfit. So it was like a boa, but it was like built into it, like went from his robe like all the way up around his neck and all the way down. And they always had that mask on, which I mean, for years, I had no idea that Owen Hart and the Blue Blazer were the same person, actually.
Yeah, he was supposed to be like a luchador, basically. And it's funny because it's kind of a precursor to, modern day fans, Sami Zayn, when he was in the Indies as El Generico, just some white guy wearing a luchador mask.
Oh, generic.
Yeah. All right. What about you, Roland? What's one of your favorite Owen memories?
Outside the horrible tragedy thing, to me, that's the first thing that pops in your head if you think of Owen. But like the actual one of the memories I have is when he won King of the Ring and became the King of Hearts. That was when I was like, oh yeah, that was one of the memories that always stands out when he had the crown and the scepter.
What about you, Jon? What's one of your favorite Owen memories?
I mean, you're getting back also for me to like the Blue Meanie stuff. Like whenever he was doing, basically, you said the Sami Zayn stuff. That I thought was probably the highlight of his like growing and getting ready to probably grow even further than what he was gonna be before the tragedy. Like, I just feel like he was eventually going to go and get that final push, especially now. I always felt like he was always in somebody's, like, spotlight away from somebody. Like, he was always wrestling Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was always on top. He was always wrestling his brother. His brother was always on top. And with, his brother leaving, and I think during that time, wasn't that when Shawn had his first, what does Triple H call him? whenever Sean had his like little meltdown and left for a little while. Wasn't that around that
Oh,
time too?
yeah.
So I think for him, like around that time, he was getting very popular with his promoing, and I think like something was possibly planned with him after revealing the mask, taking off, something like that. And I feel like he was going to get a push, but then it just never happened because of the tragedy. And that is just the saddest part of Owen. He was the person who always could, maybe would, but we never know.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories of Owen. There's two that come to mind. One is WrestleMania 10. You know, no one expected Owen to win the opening match against Brett. I mean, he was so much the underdog going into that match, and for him to win that, and you could arguably say it's still the greatest opening match in WrestleMania history. Straight 5-star match. And then the other one is his SummerSlam co-main event where he fought Brett in the steel cage match. That was also like 45 minutes long, and they just beat the ever living shit out of each other. Um, and then just one more thing about Owen, I think everyone remembers how he liked to play pranks on everybody. There's so many stories, and just that he was a well-liked guy. Like you don't ever hear anyone say a bad word about the man. So moving on to the next guy. So he tied with Owen, and it is Arn Anderson. I think just like Owen, who was he who was next to someone that was in the spotlight. You could make the same argument for Arn. Because when you stand next to the 16-time world champion like Ric Flair, it's kind of hard to even try to take the spotlight from someone like him. So we'll go around the table again. This time I'll start with Roland. What's some of your favorite Arn Anderson memories?
I always remember Arn being the enforcer. He was Ric Flair's right hand man for pretty much my entire childhood. Um, he did have a WrestleMania moment as the what was it, Brainbusters. But that was really, I mean, one of the problems with Arn was the fact that he was always in Flair's shadow. And I don't know if I can't see Arn ever having any misgivings because him and Rick were really close. Outside, in the ring and outside of the ring, they were pretty tight. So I can't say that he would have any kind of misgiving about never having the opportunity. He seems like Arn seems to me like he's kind of that salt of the earth kind of personality. Hey, this is my job. This is what I'm doing. Making sure everything gets done right. Blah blah blah. That kind of mentality, and he just stays the course, which I kind of feel is kind of sad because I thought he was an amazing wrestler.
I think a lot of people forget that he got injured at a fairly young age. He was
He
only
got
like
his neck.
30.
It was his neck, wasn't it? He got a bad
Yeah,
neck injury.
he was only like 36, maybe 37 when he had to hang it up. So he definitely retired at a pretty young age.
Well, no, he did. I want to say that he come back. He done some light work after that injury. I want to say, but it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything massive. I don't remember where he incurred the injury, but I do remember him having that neck injury.
Yeah, I think it was just years of built up. How about you, John? What's one of your favorite Arn Anderson memories?
So I really didn't get to grow up watching Arn very much. Like you said, he got injured, was out pretty young. He wasn't around much for a wrestler, but a lot of the stuff I remember was his management and his mic skills. The guy was fire on the microphone. He could get anybody heated up that he needed to. And I mean, the guy was one hell of a promoter. And to say that business is his blood is probably being 100% correct. I mean, he still is in the business today. He's going to shows, he's promoting things, he's doing things. Arn Anderson is a name that will be a legacy in the business forever. And it is a shame that the man never got a chance to hold the title.
Yeah, agreed. How about you, Rocky? I know he's one of your favorite guys.
Yeah, I always loved Arn Anderson. I know he was always in Flair's shadow. But I mean, I did grow up. I watched a lot of WCW back in those days. And the times I really remember him, I remember a lot of the times he was with the Four Horsemen, especially when the Four Horsemen were heels. Because I always looked at Arn as like, he was the real backbone of the Horsemen. Like, and when they were heels, that's when he worked best because he didn't have to say anything. He would just come in the ring, kick everybody's ass for the Horsemen, and then leave. But there was other times though. Another time, as I remember, when he was tag team champions with Larry Zbyszko, and they actually called themselves the Enforcers back then. It was like in the early '90s sometime, and I liked him during that run. And the other time I really liked him is when he had his TV championship run. And that was like late '90s, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he held that TV championship
for a while.
long time.
He feuded with Flair even during that time, when during the TV championship time. So it was with or without Flair, Arn was a staple of WCW, and like I said, he was just, to me, he really didn't even need to speak. Like his actions always. He's like one of the few wrestlers that was like, he doesn't really have to have that much mic time just because of the way he like presents himself in ring and out of ring too. What was that?
Walk quietly and pack a big stick.
Yeah. Like a lot of wrestlers I can't say that about, but Arn was like one of the few wrestlers I'm like, I think his whole persona worked without being on the mic too much.
Yeah. One of my favorite Arn memories is, so several years after he retired, there was a match at WrestleMania 18 between Undertaker and Ric Flair, and then no DQ match. And at one point towards the end of that match, Arn comes out from under the ring and hits that spine buster one last time on Undertaker to help Flair out during that match. And the crowd just fucking popped for him, man. It was an incredible moment. And kind of like what John was mentioning, his legacy will definitely be big. He definitely became one of the biggest agents in WWE. Like he personally was John Cena's road agent. So a lot of the matches that Cena had were pretty much choreographed or walked through with Arn Anderson helping them set that stuff up. All right. So moving on to our number 4 on our list. And this is one of my favorite guys of all time, Razor Ramon, or some people might know him as Scott Hall.
Hey yo,
hey yo, basically doing the Scarface impression. Doing the Scarface impression to Vince, who had never seen the movie and thought, "Wow, this guy is fucking incredible."
Just before we get started, like. That is something I actually just recently learned, is that he was doing a Scarface impression. And like the fact that he was basically pretending to be Cuban. So I never got this ever when I was watching wrestling as a kid. But the way I thought of him was as a greasy Italian. And I thought, and to me, he was like the perfect Italian because that's the way I thought they all were.
Honestly, as a kid, I had no idea he was white. I thought he was Latino.
Really? See, I thought he was white.
He had the tan. I mean, it just.
I thought he was Latino too.
I did too.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not even one. I was around a lot of Italians when I was younger, and they all had the tan and thought they were something. So that's
It, it
why I
it
thought he was
wasn't
Italian.
until he debuted in WCW and Scott Hall. I'm like, wow, that's a really white name.
What the fuck? I feel betrayed.
But yeah, so Razor Ramon got one of the best theme songs, I gotta say. I'll say the closest he ever came to winning the title in WWE was actually a couple months after he debuted. He actually got to wrestle Bret Hart for the title at the 1993 Royal Rumble. It's when he came in as a heel, but after that, he pretty much got stuck in the mid card. But one of my favorite memories for Razor Ramon or Scott Hall, one will be the ladder match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10, which was the first ever televised ladder match in WWE history. There had been one done before that with Bret and Shawn, but that was never televised. And the other moment would be just the NWO formation at Bash at the Beach would be the other big moment I always remember for him. So why don't we start with John? What's some of your favorite Razor or Scott Hall memories?
God, Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, like you were talking about that ladder match. Like he caught my attention in that match by walking underneath the ladder, and that was one of my. This dude has no care in the world. Granted, he was probably hyped up on something at the time, but he had one of those
True.
mic skills that he just screamed heel. You just wanted to hate him. And like you said, he just came out with that toothpick in his mouth. He didn't care. He just had that vibe about him that he was there just to make a paycheck, and he didn't care about anything else but that. The thing is about Scott Hall and Razor Ramon and back and forth. I mean, he was so much of a needed character that when he left and jumped ship, they had to make a fake Scott Hall. They had to make a fake Razor Ramon, and it completely tanked on them. They're like, oh, we can just use the character. No, it was him as a person. And he absolutely proved that the person makes the character doesn't make the person. And whenever he jumped ship, I really thought in WCW, that's what really grabbed me to WCW. I started off watching WCW. I kind of faded back to WWF. And then when they jumped ship, I jumped back. And I really enjoyed everything that they did as the NWO, but I felt like the NWO and everything to do with that happened with that just never really gave him a chance to be what he could be, besides the fact of drugs and alcohol kind of holding him back from probably ever doing stuff too. It's the same way. I mean, Jeff's held numerous titles for Jeff Hardy, but he has had an issue with drugs and alcohol, and it's really held him back to probably what he could have been way more of in the business.
Agreed. How about you, Roland? What's some of your favorite Razor Ramon or Scott Hall memories?
Man, so I remember when he first debuted, when he first came out, and then just the toothpick. That was it. Like, because that was just basically a more or less a middle finger to you plebeians out there. Because
Yeah,
he was
he
better
would throw
than
it
you.
right at the camera.
Yeah. Because you know what? He was better than you. And I can't remember. I remember some of his promos. Like one of them, he tells this girl to basically get out of this white. I think it was like a white Corvette or something he had. He's like, she doesn't matter. Nobody matters. Razor matter. And it's just like he is just pure, unadulterated heel for the '90s. He is one of the epitomes of a 90s heel. And like John said, he made that character. So when he left, they were desperately trying to figure something out, and they couldn't. You can't copy that. And when he came over to WCW, it was great just seeing him actually. It felt like he had more freedom to do kind of what he wanted to do, and he was allowed to be him, which also, in my opinion, actually kind of worked against him because it kind of feels like they had let him go, took the reins off of him, and just, here you go. And I think that's ultimately what started his battle with a lot of alcohol. And anyone that's into wrestling knows about Scott Hall's addiction problems and how awful, how much of a horrible fight he had. And you can kind of watch in the WCW years the eventual decline into the latter years where he was having problems holding it together in the ring. But one of my favorite moments was his WrestleMania with the NWO when they rolled out.
During the Sting Triple H match.
Yeah, I was with Rocky. I totally was like, oh my God, yes, the NWO. And then at the same point in time, I was like, the retirement home's let out. But this is so fucking cool.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I marked out. What's going on, John?
I was surprised Kevin Nash made it to the ring.
What about tearing a quad? I just wanted to say another thing. You mentioned his entrance with a toothpick. I also loved all that gold he would have around his neck.
And the freaking spit curl.
Yeah, and he would take it off, hand it to the ring, to the bell keeper or whoever it was, and he, right into the camera. If that goes missing, you go missing. Make sure you don't fuck with his goal. What about you, Rocky? What's some of your favorite Razor or Scott Hall memories?
Well, you guys have kind of went over them because, but my favorite moments, but if I had to narrow it down to my two favorite moments, my two favorite moments would, of course, be the ladder match with Shawn Michaels. That you can't, and I actually feel kind of bad with that match for Scott Hall because, like, now whenever you see anything about that ladder match, you always see that image of Shawn Michaels doing the splash off the ladder on him. And Scott Hall won that match. Razor Ramon won that.
Yeah.
But all the promotion now shows Shawn Michaels like on top. Like, everybody's kind of forgot that he won that match.
Yeah.
But the other is a big moment, and this happened quite often. But the first time it happens, I remember how insane it was, and that's when it was still NWO was just forming. It was just the Outsiders, Hall and Diesel, and the first time they came out and threw the announce team off the table and took over. To me, that was a big moment. And then they just spent the entire match, like the rest of the matches, like making fun of the wrestlers that was in the ring and everybody else in WCW. And to me, that made their storyline real. The fact that NWO came out and was like, "Fuck all y'all, get out of here. We're taking over."
Scott Hall's WCW.
Yeah.
Where the big boys play.
I also got to say, the best thing ever to come from Scott Hall is anytime he took a Stone Cold Stunner.
Yes. He took it very well too. Just not as good as The Rock took the stunner, but he took it really well too.
Well, if I'm correct, I actually think The Rock took that to heart, like how he would take the stunner. He's like, I got to take it better every time next time because I got to take it better than anybody else has ever done it. And like, because the double stunner was that image burns into my head. Like every single time I think of Scott Hall was him standing back up like, oh yeah, and then taking another one.
All right, so coming in at number 3, you could say this pick is absolutely perfect. Is Kurt Hennig. This is a guy. It's a bit of a cheat because he did win the AWA title, but not too many people care about that title. Um, I think the biggest thing with him was just injuries at the wrong time. Because right when Vince was ready to put the title on guys like Shawn and Brett, Mr. Perfect was injured around those times. So I think in his case it was just missed opportunities, man. But one of my favorite Mr. Perfect memories is his SummerSlam match against Bret Hart. This was at SummerSlam '91. So Mr. Perfect, he was injured going into the match. He was just supposed to drop the title, and he delivered basically a 5-star match with Bret. And one of my favorite moments is actually the promo as well before the match, where he basically tells Bret, they call you the excellence of execution. Well, excellent isn't perfect. And then my other favorite memory of his is just him and Bobby as his manager, where he would throw the towel behind his back and Bobby would catch it behind his back. And of course, also just spitting the gum in the air and slapping it away as well. So we'll start with you, Rocky. What's some of your favorite Mr. Perfect memories?
Well, one of the biggest memories I have of him was it was like a pay-per-view, a Bash at the Beach, when he turned. Well, I guess it was when he first came into WCW, and he was Diamond Dallas Page's partner, and he turned on him to basically join the NWO. And it was like mid-match, like they were like in a tag teams match, and he like turned on him and joined Scott Hall and everybody. And I remember more from the WCW days than I do the when he was actually Mr. Perfect, when he was Kurt Hennig instead of Mr. Perfect, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. But she had a lot of like good NWO moments, and throughout the time he was in WCW. I know that he was like, I heard Hogan say that there was no one that could outwork Kurt Hennig when he was ready to work. Like he was the best there was in the locker room. But I was I was pretty big Diamond Dallas Page fan back in those days. I guess you'd say I still am. I still like Paul Page to this day. But when he turned on, when I was really happy to see Mr. Perfect show up with Diamond Dallas Page, and then he freaking turns on him, which was perfect. I mean, that was like that was a Mr. Perfect thing to do right there.
All right. How about you, John? What's some of your favorite Mr. Perfect or Kurt Hennig memories?
I mean, you took it with the match. I mean, that was like by far one of my favorite matches that he had ever done. Probably a lot of the stuff that would come along with him and Bobby the Brain. Like you said, they worked so well as a team together that I would probably say that I don't think anybody else could have been his manager. Like I don't know. I just can't, going through like, probably the only person that I can think of would be Paul Heyman, because Paul Heyman can probably work with anybody. But Mr. Perfect was one of those guys, like you said, I think it was like the injuries at the wrong time. And he was like the epitome of what wrestling screamed. He was intricate in the ring. He could entertain. He could be a heel. He could be a face. He could do pretty much anything that he needed to do within the industry, except that whenever the time came, he was just unlucky and got hurt. And it's also just incredibly sad to see, what WWE did with his son. I think that he could have been built to probably give that title run that his father never had, and WWE just dropped the ball there with him. I feel like a lot of these people that we were talking about were just at that wrong time whenever it was just Shawn and Brett. I just feel like a lot of them are falling into that category where it was Shawn and Brett, or it was Sting and Hogan, or it was this and that. And I feel like that's always been an issue in wrestling, is that extremely long title reigns have given people, and repetitive title reigns have given people, have not given people the chance to receive the title opportunities that they deserve. And Mr. Perfect is one of those perfect examples.
No, I completely agree with that, because I mean, when you think about it, the WWE in the 80s only had like 4 or 5 different wrestlers hold the title in that entire decade. It went from Backlund to Sheik to Hogan to Andre to Randy Savage. Those are the only title holders in the 80s for the heavyweight title. How about you, Roland? What are some of your favorite Mr. Perfect memories?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the Brett match. That was probably one of the things I remembered most. Now, obviously, I did grow up with WCW, and that was where I watched a lot of my wrestling. But I always remember Kurt Hennig being Mr. Perfect, not so much as Kurt Hennig. The towel, and John, you said it right when you said there was not a single person in wrestling that could manage him better than Bobby the Brain Heenan. It's like they were almost built for one another. Them bouncing off of one another, things like that. Almost like I want to call it, what was it? The perfection of arrogance. Those two, they personified arrogance to a T. And this is totally off subject, but now I'm wondering how many people wound up having chewing gum stuck in their hair at these live events. These are the thoughts that kept me out of college. So
yeah. Before we move on to the next guy, just one more memory is the West Texas Rednecks singing "Rap is Crap." If you guys remember that at all, you don't? No. All right.
I do remember "Be a Man," the Macho Man's rap album, where he talks about Kurt Hennig.
All right. So moving on to the next guy. Another staple of 80s wrestling, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. So I did talk, you will see a mini episode where we kind of talk about him coming close to winning the title at WrestleMania 4, but it ended up switching to Randy winning it at the end of that tournament. But as a consolation prize, he got his own version of a title, the $1 Million Belt. We'll start with Roland on this one. What's some of your favorite Ted DiBiase moments?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot. There is a lot. The man was the living embodiment of kayfabe. His gimmick was the most intricate gimmick in all of wrestling history. He was given a blank checkbook to write whatever he had to do to back his claims up. And I'm not even getting into the wrestling part yet. But his promos were so good. He was such an asshole. Like everybody. And I've actually talked with Ted about this when I met him, and he's just like, everybody remembers this promo for whatever reason. Everybody remembers the kid with the basketball. And because that was the first thing I talked to him about, was like, oh my God, I remember when I was little, I seen you had the basketball, and that kid dribbled it all the way up to 99 and knocked it out of his hands before it hit 100. Like, he's like, yes, everybody remembers that. And, the kid still got his payoff, though.
Yeah, it was brought up on Bruce Pritchard's podcast. He said that afterwards, they gave the kid like $500 and then took him to the merchandise stand to like pick out as much shit as he wanted.
Yeah, they took care of the kid. And one of the interesting stories that he talks about is he would go into restaurants and make a huge spectacle that the $1 Million Man was in town and that he could afford to buy these poor people's lunch for them that day. And he would literally just buy everyone in the hotel or the restaurant. He would buy their food. He would cover it of course on the open credit card that Vince had given him for that. But his matches, some of the like I want to remember the $1 million. The $1 Million Corporation that he started up. I remember that. And now, if I remember right, like I said, Andre, Ted had paid Andre to go win him the belt.
Yeah.
Because
which led to WrestleMania 4, the vacating the title because of that.
When you're the $1 Million Man, you don't have to lower yourself to actually get into the ring. You can just pay somebody else to do it. Because Ted DiBiase taught me one thing. Everybody's got a price, and everybody's going to pay.
All right. Let's move on. Rocky, what's some of your favorite DiBiase memories?
Well, I'm going to be honest. Mostly what I remember Ted DiBiase from is the WWF video games from the 80s. Because I didn't really watch WWF during those days. So, like, I knew who he was, but I never was watching his stuff at the time. So, like, the times I remember him is like when he was with his very short-lived time with the NWO.
Billionaire Ted.
Yeah, and that didn't last very long at all until they got rid of him. Which I had heard that was like because Eric Bischoff and him didn't like each other. And then the $1 Million Corporation, I do remember that when he had his own stable. But that's about it. That's about the only things I remember from the $1 Million Man.
Well, the funny thing is, like, the NWO would play those commercials during WCW, and they would say, "Oh, these commercials were paid by the NWO."
Yeah.
And then a couple months in, you find out that he's been the one financing them or whatever, and it just made sense. What about you, John? What's some of your favorite Ted DiBiase moments or memories?
I would have to say that it's his laugh. I mean, that laugh is basically going to be it. But I think my favorite memory is actually going to be a lot more recent, and that's whenever he was managing his son. And during that time, I felt like his son could have been champion, and he gave his son the $1 Million belt and everything else like that. My favorite memory with him with that is because that I could actually see him. He seemed like legitimately happy. Like he was like really enjoying doing that work. And everything else that I watched with him was from like watching reruns or stuff from like back in the day and everything. I don't know. I could see why they would have made him champion, but I don't see him have earning the championship like as normal, like wrestling in the ring, like you said, like probably paying for it or doing something slick with it or anything else like that, or somebody get knocked out, crawling in the ring, pinning them 1, 2, 3, taking the title, something like that. He always seemed to be that guy, like you said, that we talked about this before. This was supposed to be Vince's like character, possibly, like he really loved the idea of this, and the whole idea of the character was being beyond a championship. It was just being, I'm rich, I don't need anything, forget you all.
Yeah, as John mentioned, Vince McMahon always wanted to be a wrestler, and his father wouldn't allow him to be. So when he used to think of possible characters that he wanted to portray, this was his idea of what he wanted to be as a wrestler, just a cocky, rich guy who could, buy his way out of anything. But some of my favorite memories of DiBiase are the vignettes of him before he debuted. They would have him driving around in a luxury car. They would have him wearing these big fur coats, or buying out a public pool, and all the little kids are like beyond the fence, just like looking in, and while he's on a little floaty thing in the center of the pool, and he tells he pays off the guy running the pool, like, hey, get those kids away from there. I don't want to be looking at sad kids while I'm having a good time or whatever. But yeah, it's like I said, he was supposed to have won the title, and he was actually really pissed off when they changed their mind. But once he got those royalty checks for the replica belts, he kind of didn't care as much anymore. So before we reveal our number one, I just wanted to list off a couple honorable mentions. We won't go into too much detail with some of these guys, except for maybe one or two. For starters, Barry Windham. He came close to winning the title when he went up against Lex Luger after Ric Flair left for WWE. Rick Rude is another one that he definitely had a couple opportunities at the title, but never was able to win the big one. Kind of dealt with injuries too. Wrong time, man. Wade Barrett is another one, kind of modern day choice there. He got a few title opportunities, but it seems like his way to the top was squashed by John Cena and Randy Orton. Maybe not wanting to share the spotlight with him. William Regal is another one. He was supposed to. There were rumors that he was finally going to become world champion in 2008. They put him in a feud with Triple H. But William Regal himself has admitted that he got very self-conscious that he was finally being put in that spotlight, and started using some performance-enhancing drugs, got caught, and pretty much derailed his championship opportunity before he could get there, unfortunately. British Bulldog is another member of the Hart Foundation. He had a few title opportunities against Brett himself around '96, but I guess they never really put the ball in his hands. The next person on the list, it's a bit of a cheat because he did win the ECW title, but never won the big one in WWE or WCW. Is that Bam Bam Bigelow? He's one of those guys that he got a push around '95, but apparently he had a lot of issues with the Click, so that kind of derailed his opportunity. Brian Pillman. I know Rocky and Roland, you guys are big WCW guys, so you might have some thoughts on Pillman.
Good old Flying Brian.
Super talented guy, man.
Yeah, he was. I really liked. I think my favorite memory of Pillman was the crazy Pillman when him and Stone Cold were feuding.
Yeah. Well, my favorite Pillman memory is him kayfabing Eric Bischoff, telling him,
Yeah,
"You should fire me, and we'll make it look real. Just file the paperwork, and we'll fool everybody." Bischoff files the paperwork, and Pillman goes and signs with WWE the next day.
I think Pillman. I think my favorite moment was whenever Vince, Austin, and Pillman scared the crap out of the network enough to cut them off the air whenever Austin came into the house and Pillman pulled the gun. And they were like, no, just pulled the plug on the whole thing. And Vince was like, this was planned. It wasn't like they scared I think even the camera crew didn't know, and they scared the crap out of them too.
Yeah.
only showing that some of the best moments in wrestling history is when you totally don't let anyone know what's going on and just let it happen.
Another thing, like you mentioned, Pillman and Austin, they were so great as a heel tag team as the Hollywood
Yeah.
Blondes. And if you've never seen it before, check out Brian Pillman versus Justin Thunder Liger from Beach Splash '92. It's one of the best, greatest matches of all time.
Jushin Thunder Liger is a great wrestler too.
Yeah, I mean, he just retired this past couple months. Next on the list, I think he kind of fits in the Arn Anderson role a bit, but Matt Hardy. Unfortunately, had to be in the shadow of his brother Jeff. Uh, you know, Jeff was. I mean, in the last couple of years, Matt Hardy has shown that he could be just as charismatic as Jeff, but it was almost like a little too late, you know. Matt, I'll say this much for Matt: those TLC matches that him, his brother, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian had from like the late '90s to mid 2000s, then are some of the greatest fucking wrestling like spot fest you'll ever see.
See, Matt, I think, had a lot of issues with being out injured and then having a lot of issues within the WWE with Lita. So, I mean, I think that's part of the stuff that held him back. But from his rawest moments were whenever he was facing Edge after that whole Lita thing. Like, you could just see that he was letting some anger out. And just recently, they dropped the ball with not using Matt the correct way, and now they're going to probably lose out to I mean, he's won like every single independent heavyweight championship I can think of that's out there, but he has never held the biggest one. And now that they have let him go again, I think that was probably the last opportunity they had to do a run with him.
Definitely. Yeah. To use a 2020 phrase, Matt Hardy and Edge, the original entanglement. So moving on to someone else. This is kind of a big, very talented guy, Shane McMahon. I do want to mention, get into him a little bit.
This one, I was like, what? Why is he on your list?
Because of me.
He had some great fucking matches, man. During the Attitude Era, he wrestled Rock and Austin and Triple H pretty consistently. And if you haven't watched it, watch Kurt Angle versus Shane McMahon in the street fight at King of the Ring 2001. Like, this is like a top 5 match for me. like at several points in this match, Shane McMahon almost breaks his neck during this match because uh, Kurt Angle is suplexing him through glass, uh, like a glass wall that does not shatter, and Shane lands on his head. And instead of stopping the match, Shane tells Kurt, like, fucking throw me through it. Like, let's do this again. And the reason Kurt breaks his tailbone during this match and still finishes the match. So that's one of the reasons he wasn't able to suplex Shane at full strength and just continues to drop Shane on his neck. And Vince McMahon is in the back just fucking going nuts thinking his son is about to die during fucking live television. But and I know, John, you want to talk about the Hell in a Cell match versus The Undertaker that he had.
I mean, anything that Shane has been in has been probably a 4 or 5 star match. I mean, besides we won't go into like some of the stuff where he tagged with his dad and everything like that, but I mean, Shane has shown a lot of character, and I'm surprised with how much, you know, Vince wanted to be in the business. That, you know, he never did put the title on his son, but maybe there's a reason for that. And maybe Shane never wanted it. But his Hell in a Cell match that he had with Undertaker, I think he proved that he could hang with anything that any of the big guys put out there. And I mean, he had the balls to jump off the cell with a diving elbow straight to the Undertaker. And I mean, if he did not gain respect after that match from the, you know, the man who used to run the yard, still is his yard, but I think that Shane could honestly retire happy with just that match alone.
Now, what year was that match? I want to make sure it's the one I'm thinking it is.
2016.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched that where he goat jumps. What was it, like right off the top of the freaking cage?
And this is the different cell. This isn't like the old school cell that was like 16 feet. This one is more like 24 feet or more.
He just right off the top. Because I remember me and my friend Joe were watching this, and we were both like, oh shit. And he just does it. He just fucking goes for it.
Got those Air Jordan ups.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, if you haven't watched either one of those matches, look them up on the network. The Kurt Angle one is from King of the Ring 2001. The Hell in a Cell match is from WrestleMania 32. Like I said, hell, fucking Vince McMahon won the title. You mean something Shane couldn't have won it for like a week at least? And then our last honorable mention is Jake the Snake Roberts.
Master of the DDP.
Yeah. This is a guy, supposedly he was supposed to get into a feud with Hogan over the title. And then Hogan could hear that the crowd was kind of cheering Jake a little bit more than him, even though he was the face. And Jake was supposed to be the heel, and pretty much put an end to the feud before it even started. And the other thing with Jake, I mean, most famously is if you thought Razor had demons, personal demons, yeah. Razor's
Jake
demons
wrote the fucking book.
hide under the bed when it comes to Jake's demons.
Yeah, no shit. That man wrote the book on fucking issues. But I just want to say this. People wonder why I kind of shit talk Hulk Hogan. That right there is one of the reasons why I shit talk Hulk Hogan a lot.
Yeah,
they like him more than me, but I'm Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, Jake could stand in a room with Ozzy Osbourne and call Ozzy a bitch.
That's true.
based on the number of drugs that man has done. It's actually surprising that he's still with us today.
And what's even a bigger surprise is that he's actually clean now.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, actually, both Jake and Razor are clean nowadays, thanks to DDP.
Yeah.
All right, so now time for our number one person. He was someone that we all agreed should have been world champion at some point, but for some reason never was. And that is Hot Rod, Roddy Piper. I'll start with Roland. What's some of your favorite Roddy Piper memories, man?
By far, he is my favorite heel wrestler. And I mean, not even heel wrestler. He's just one of my favorite wrestlers in general. God, his WrestleMania matches were great. Where he, the whole Cindy Law, where he slapped Cindy Law. I thought that was hilarious. That was the best heel move ever. One of the matches, and it's only because I seen it just recently, was him and Hogan in WCW, where he's taking on the NWO, and that was a eye-opening match because I realized that Hot Rod at that point in time was a little younger than I am now, and I was like, "Whoa, I don't look nowhere near as decent." But I can't pinpoint a match, but just hands down, the guy, he was all about the business, and he was all about the boys and how the boys got treated. He always watched out for the wrestlers. He always took up for them. You don't find a lot of people that are willing to, that believe in that old fashioned, you pull your you pay your dues, and it's like a fraternal brotherhood that he was, that he had that belief system in. And he was very much, like I said, about the business. And it was a shame that he never won. Even with when the NWO was going on, of course, there was all that kind of fuckery going on behind doors too. Hogan will not put down a belt at all.
Well, in Hogan's defense on this one, Roddy actually, it was kind of his choice to not be champion in a way because he enjoyed being the heel so much.
Yeah.
And he never, if you watch any of those old matches, Piper always loses by disqualification or count out. And to remain the ultimate heel, he never wanted to be pinned. And so that's one of the main reasons I think why he never won the title. Because from 1985 until 1992, he was never pinned once. He always lost. Yeah, the old woman giving him the finger in front of her kids.
That's when you got heel heat, when you can walk into a ring and a mother and her 4 children, she just leans over her kids to flip you off.
Not to go into too many details with the mini episodes, but Bret Hart was the first person to ever pin him in WWE and at WrestleMania 8. Yeah. Was the first person to pin him cleanly in the ring. But Rocky, some of your favorite Piper memories?
Well, I have to say, like we're again in like how I didn't watch WWF or WWE back in the days. But I will say, I'll just throw this out here. The biggest thing I remember of Piper from those days is not the wrestling itself, but Hulk Hogan's rock and roll wrestling.
Oddly enough, I was talking about that today.
And I watched that cartoon all the time. What was that?
Oddly enough, I was actually talking about that with someone today.
So like as a kid, like that was like and even though like, you know, like Rowdy was the leader of the bad guys in that cartoon, even as a kid I was like, I think I prefer Rowdy on this cartoon over the good guys. But then later on, you know, he ended up coming to WCW. And then I always remember the when he came in and he basically outed Bischoff as NWO. And then he had his match with Hogan. And the first match at Starrcade was a great match, Rowdy versus Hogan, because Rowdy took out everybody and basically by himself. Like he took out the Giants, he took out the Outsiders, Hogan, like just wiped the floor with them and won the match. And he took out the Giant and he took out Hogan with his sleeper move. And while Giant was holding him in midair, he took out the Giant with his sleeper move. And then walked out victorious. And then, of course, you had the whole Giant thing where the Giant was going to turn on him because of power. But then he was still denied because that was always a match. That was a match to get him a title match. So that was, and then when he finally got the title match, you know, there was disqualification and everything. So there was no, Hogan kept the belt anyway. But I actually was surprised because when you put these out here and gave us the choices, I actually figured Rowdy had won the match at some point. I'd won the title at some point. I was surprised he had never won it. And as soon as I saw his name, I was like, that is really fuck up right there. Rowdy never won a title shot.
What about you, John? What's some of your favorite Roddy moments?
I would have to say, whenever he chased down O.J. Simpson.
Oh, the WrestleMania 12.
Oh man, that would have to be one of the craziest things that I had seen in wrestling ever to date. I'm there watching it, and I have no clue at that time about the O.J. Simpson, anything else like that. I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm like, Roddy Piper's chasing this dude through traffic. Holy crap, what's going on? And then like they finished the match. He was willing to do anything for entertainment. He was an entertainer. And I mean, like I've heard stories that people ran into him in elevators, and the kids were like, "Oh, Roddy Piper," and he just didn't break character, started jumping up and down on the elevator and stuff like that, trying to be an a-hole to the kids and still come off as a heel. Like, I don't want you to like me. Don't like me. You're not supposed to like me. I'm a heel right now. Stop. And that's one of those things that, like, whenever you say like he was never champion. I go back to like that time period. There were just so many people that they missed out on, and I hope they learn from their mistakes, and in the future they crown people champion who definitely deserve it. And you know, like time periods of having championships for 100 days, 150 days, that's great. But I mean, we're talking time periods where people had championships for 2 years, and like you said, Hogan wouldn't drop the belt. And I feel it feels the same way with Shawn. Shawn wouldn't drop the belt. It feels the same way with a lot of that back then, that there was just these select guys that they just kept the belt on instead of deciding to bounce it back and forth between other people. And having a conversation like this and mentioning the 5 names that we have, even the honorable mentions of them never being champions. If you go back and think about this, it's like, wow, that's weird. How is that person never a champion? They put so much into the business. Wow, how is that person never a champion? They put so much into the business. And I feel like that's why today we have so many people deflecting over to AEW. But, grass may not even be greener on the other side. We're still not seeing much championship movement there. I feel like there should definitely be something of an opportunity being made, something coming back to give people more of an opportunity to have those championship title reigns, especially if they've been there for a long time. Because the person I even compare to like nowadays would be like the Miz, would be kind of more of a Roddy Piper in my opinion, and he had one really good heel title reign and still hasn't had anything else, but yet he has put so much into the business on the media side, on every other side, to keep them running. And I feel like that guys like Brock Lesnar and guys like Hulk Hogan, they're afraid to lose them, but they have so much more talent that they could spend money on. It's kind of like a franchise baseball team. They realize I've got, $10 million into this one person, but yet I could have 10 people to replace them who are just as good with $1 million each. And then if I give each of them opportunities and I keep the entertainment up, I just, created more of an opportunity for the smaller guy than I did just the one guy over and over and over again.
No. I mean, not that long ago, Brock Lesnar had like a 500-day title reign. So some of my favorite Piper memories, there's a couple that come to mind. One is the very first WrestleMania when he gets the whole like marching band to do his entrance. That was always very cool to me. Another is, of course, you gotta mention
Yes.
Piper's Pit. And him breaking a coconut on Jimmy Snooker's
I was
head.
going to say, if somebody doesn't mention that, that's going to be a crying shame, because I was like, wait a minute, I didn't talk about the coconut.
Yeah. Funny story with the OJ thing is that they actually considered reaching out to OJ Simpson. This was in 1996, and having a segment where Piper basically yells at OJ Simpson. But at the last second, they thought, you know what, this is maybe in poor taste, and didn't go. They didn't end up offering OJ the spot. And then, of course, just some of his more famous lines. Just when you think you have the answers, I change the questions. And one of our favorite from They Live. I've come to chew gum
and kick ass.
and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubble gum.
Mama don't like no tattletales.
Yeah. But yeah, he was a very talented guy. If you guys get a chance, Bruce Pritchard has a podcast, and he was very close friends with Roddy Piper. If you want to hear some really good Piper stories, he did an episode completely dedicated to him around the time that Piper passed away. And during that show, Pritchard does break down a few times and cries over his friend. But there's some really great stories on that episode. If you get a chance, look that up. And Pritchard has a very great Piper impression. It's almost like you're listening to Piper in the studio. But this concludes our list. Any final thoughts from anyone? Rocky?
I just want to say that about Rowdy Piper. Like you mentioned it for a second, but he was a really good actor as well. Like on top of that, like They Live is like a great freaking movie. And even I don't know if you guys seen it, but Hell Comes to Frogtown. Have you guys watched that?
Not in a long time.
But he's like a really good actor in that. I mean, that's
He's
a very
probably
low
the best thing
budget,
about
crappy
Hell Comes to
movie.
Frog.
Yeah, like it's a crappy movie, but Rowdy Piper puts on a really good performance in that movie. Like I just Like, I just wanted to say that because I think his movies are so underrated, and people don't think of him as an actor, but he was a really good actor in just about everything he did outside of wrestling.
He has a really great performance in a wrestling episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Check that out too. It's freaking hilarious.
I will say one of the things about, and it's going to be about Piper. A couple of things. One, I don't know if anyone out there has them downloaded or anything, but I know, like, I think he passed away. What was it? 2015. I want to say. Was it 2016?
2016.
Because when I was living in when I was living in Corbin, I always listened to his podcast, Piper's Pit. He had the Piper's Pit podcast, and I listened to that thing religiously. And I haven't been able to find it, since all of that had happened since he had passed away. So I don't know if there's a way to find his old podcast or not. But I remember really loving the Piper's Pit. And if you want a funny story, I can't remember. I want to say it was either Roddy Piper's induction into the Hall of Fame or it was Ric Flair's. But it's Ric Flair talking about Roddy Piper, and apparently they had some real fun stories together about. One of the stories is how he first met Ric Flair. And it involved hemorrhoids, and that I had actually heard that story from Dusty Rhodes. He's like, "I'm Roddy Piper. Okay, bye."
Probably involves some cocaine too.
But it involved some of the time. I think it was Rick. I think it was a story about him and Rick in Mexico. So you can almost guarantee there was cocaine in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think it helps that nowadays there's basically 2 world titles in WWE, so you definitely get some guys getting more opportunities that might have never have won the title. But on that note, all these guys we listed never won a world title, but Jinder Mahal held the title for 170 days. Just remember that.
No, I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now. So, Jinder Mahal left, came back, won the title. Drew McIntyre left, came back, won the title. Heath Slater is coming back, and he's winning that fucking title. I'm telling you now, he is winning it. He said his goodbye. He said his goodbye. He's gonna go do something, and he's gonna come back looking like both McIntyre and Jinder Mahal. Somehow, some way, just jacked up,
Super
and
jacked
he's
up.
going to win the title.
You heard it here first, folks. The one man band is gonna become world heavyweight champion one day.
All 3 of them are going to end up having it just from being in that group together. It was destiny.
So from your hosts, just have a good night, everyone. For my co-host Rocky,
Later, everybody.
my other co-host Roland,
Guys, have a good night. Stay safe and healthy.
and thanks for joining us, John.
No problem. You have a good night.
All right, till next time, guys.